Welcome to the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment podcast. My name's Stephen Rosen, and in this podcast we go beneath the surface of people's lives to find out what makes them tick. My own life I wrote about in this book, Lost in the Babylon. It's through childhood adversity, organised crime and a successful life as a businessman in the city. When I talk to people, we go beneath the surface of where they got to in their lives and we find out what really makes them tick. So if you want to follow me, connect to me with social media at Cockney Prophet. And if you enjoy this podcast, please like it, subscribe or follow us and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment podcast with me, Stephen Rosen, and my guest today is David Lee Lurie. How you doing, David?
I'm doing super well, Stephen. Thank you so much. It's been a beautiful morning here on Mallorca, where we happen to be filming this, and I'm very excited and honored to be part of this.
Yeah, it's really good. Really excited to have you here. And I was talking to my girlfriend this morning. She was saying, "Who's coming? Who's your guest today?" And I said, "It's David." And she said, "What does he do?" And I said, "Wow, he kind of does a lot of stuff." She said, "Well, why do you want to talk to him? Tell me." So I said, I just thought about it. And I felt into where I know you from. And the first place I met you really was at the ecstatic dance. Mm-hmm. And you kind of do the kirtan before. And then you hold the space and you kind of break the ice for everyone. I just felt such good energy from you holding that space. And then what you put out into the world in our song when we do the kirtan song and just your general kind of, I think you carry a lot of light and a lot of consciousness. And that was what I said to her. I said, I don't know really I know he teaches yoga and he does some workshops and also, you do retreats and that, don't you? So I'll let you explain what you do, actually.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. It's for the first, let's say, 20 years, maybe 15 to 18 years of my path as a yoga teacher. I did my first yoga teacher training in the year 2000. And this was when the yoga wave was just beginning to start to roll and to peak. And I hopped on and caught and rode that wave for a long time. I was very identified as the yoga teacher. It was something that I loved about my character. It was because it was more than just someone who does something with his body. For me, yoga is a full holistic practice of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And so I felt like, this is who I am. I've always been a musician since I was 15 or 16 years old. I've been into music. And I also started doing, as you mentioned, kirtan and mantra singing also around 2000s when I did my first immersion into mantra music. And so I was really identified as that. And my wife, Miriam, who's been on the podcast before.
Miriam's been on the podcast.
One of the early adapters.
It's a fantastic podcast. It's not on YouTube, but it's on the audio. So if anyone hasn't heard it, go right back to season 1 and it's brilliant.
Absolutely. So Miriam and I used to lead yoga teacher trainings in Brazil. We would take groups for 1 month in the jungle. And I used to be a full-time yoga teacher and entertainer and travel guide and organizer of everything of this. And like I said, this was something that I was really identified with. And when I moved here to Mallorca in 2008, kind of to be a full-time resident here on the island, still doing quite a bit of traveling and teaching yoga and identifying with that, things started to shift in my world and in my life. I started organizing ecstatic dances here on a regular basis. It must have been around 2013 or 14, maybe 15 like this. And been organizing those events. And from there, it's really expanded into event producer. I'm one of the organizers of Yoga Damar Spirit Festival that happens here on the island. The ecstatic dances. I feel like I've got my fingers in a lot of different soups, stews. Can I put my finger in the soup?
Pies, whatever,
pies. There we go. Thank you. I've got my hands in a lot of things that all have to do with somehow spiritual evolution and the expansion of consciousness. I have a self-defined purpose as my purpose is to open consciousness and vitality. And I'll jump on another section of the things that I do is for the last 10 years, I've been organizing and leading a men's circle on Mallorca that meets weekly and supporting men in our journeys this way. And the discovery and connection to my purpose and supporting other men in discovering and living their purpose is also a big chapter of their lives. And now that the yoga teacher identity has really settled down in my life, I feel more aligned with being sometimes a farmer on our land. We have a beautiful piece of land, and I love paying attention to the seasons and to the earth and to the dirt and the flowers and the birds and the bees, and continuing with event production. I do the best I can to be a father to our 2 grown children. I became, when Miriam and I got together, our daughter was 15 years old and Samuel was 13. So there was a baptism by fire. I'm giving you lots of talking points, by the way. I hope you've got some mental notes.
I'm trying to register them all. But
I'll eventually stop for some questions.
Yeah.
But I had a baptism of fire in terms of parenting, from being a single male traveling yoga teacher, Aquarius, very hippie style, to falling in love with a single mother of 2 living on an island, and she's a Taurus. So it was like we were coming at the world through very different perspectives. And 17 years later, our relationship is very deep and connected, and so is my relationship to the kids. Yeah. So parenting has been a big piece of it. And there's the introduction.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the reason I asked you to come and talk. But all of that stuff, and that's kind of, the stuff that I see, and what I love about authentic people is that, they don't just talk about this stuff, they're living this stuff. And there's a big difference, because there's a lot of people, probably got great kind of aspirations, but they talk about stuff, and then when you kind of talk to them behind the scenes, then it's kind of slightly different. But with you and certainly Miriam, are connected on a really great level. David, you come from America, and
yes.
How was it growing up? Because you spoke about, you spoke about having that identity to start with, but I wonder what formed that identity, and why did you grasp it so much and put so much energy into being something?
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful question. Thanks for starting there, because I have a very unique American story, as do 300 million others. My mother was born and raised in Cairo, Egypt. To an Egyptian father, many generations of Egyptian Jews. My grandmother, on my mother's side, was a first-generation Egyptian from an Italian father and a Syrian mother. So my great-grandparents were Italian and Syrian. So on that side of the family, everybody Jewish on that side of the family was generations and generations in the Middle East. My mother and her family were exiled in 1964. She told me the story before she passed away last year, that she remembers the government soldiers knocking on the door saying, you have 48 hours to sell your belongings and get out of this country. So that's what they did. They took a boat to France. They spent a couple months in France where they were offered visas either to Israel or to the United States. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather looked at his 3 children, and they all said, America, America, America. It was like, no question. None of them wanted to go back to the Middle East area. And so they got on a boat and landed in Fairfax, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in 1965. Wow. My mother eventually got accepted to a small town in western North Carolina, which is a little bit like off the beaten path, not such an educated part of the world, but there was a small community college that wanted to build an international community. And so my mother, speaking only Arabic and French, barely any English, ended up going to this university. And in the first spring she was there, she asked her professor, she said, look, this is the Jewish holiday of Pesach, the story of the Exodus from Egypt, which is my story. I'm relating to it very much now.
Yeah.
Do you know somewhere that I can go and celebrate this holiday? And the professor, being, a good professor, says, oh, here's a beautiful Jewish girl. My friend Milton Lurie has 3 Jewish boys, a Jewish girl, a Jewish boy. Let me see what I can do. Bada bing, bada bing. A matchmaker. And so he called my grandfather. My grandfather says, Michael, go pick up this woman. And so my dad tells the story. Literally, from the time he picked her up until the time he dropped her off, she barely spoke a single word because she didn't speak English at the time. My father's side of the family immigrated from Russia and Poland. You're getting the extended version of my identity.
It's lovely that you've got so much knowledge about your family. Because
it means my identity has something to do with it, because on my father's side it has the Russian, Polish, Lithuanian side of Jews that immigrated to the States in the mid-1800s. And they came over and landed in the Chicago, New York area, started working in textiles and fabrics, Jewish business, and ended up relocating to the South where they could manufacture, because they could grow the cotton, grow the materials, spin it into whatever materials. So on that side of the family, Jewish businesses, entrepreneurs for a couple of generations. So on one half, I'm a first generation American of an Egyptian Jewish immigrant. And on the other side, textiles and kind of typical Jewish businesses this way. But in the town where I was raised in Western North Carolina, it was very Southern. I can talk Southern if you want me to, because this is where I was born and raised, but it ain't my normal way of talking, but I'm really used to it, because that's how it is. And so I was born and raised in this small town as one of the only Jewish families. I ended up going to a Catholic school at the time because it was the best school around for my young education. I had a bar mitzvah at age 13, and on the day of my bar mitzvah, it would have been in 1986, I remember very clearly, in my town, the same day the Ku Klux Klan was having a rally. This was when they still did those things in America. In my town, they were marching with the hoods, with the whole story that they're attached to. And there I was having my Jewish rite of passage. And my family, I brought it up and I talked about it. I talked about it on the pulpit in front of all the congregation, that this is happening and we should count our blessings that we are free enough to do this, and we still have a hard road to climb, especially with the story of my mother and her family literally being kicked out of their country as a result of that.
So at 13 you was very conscious and very understanding of life and the surroundings of where you was and what was happening. And
it does feel like that, through my infancy things were quite Jewish, and then when I got to be 13 after my bar mitzvah, my parents said, okay, we've gotten you to this point, the rest is up to you. You decide. We felt our responsibility was to get you to this stage, but now the path is yours. And so I kept with the history and the roots of that, but also along around that time, at age 15, my friends and I discovered LSD. We had gotten turned on to the band The Grateful Dead, and a couple of my friends went to their first Dead show in the mid to late 80s and came back with acid. And we found a way that we could send $100 with Western Union to some hippies in California, and about 10 days to 2 weeks later, literally in the mail, a sheet of acid would arrive. It was colorless and odorless and blah, blah, blah. And so we started with like recreational experimentation that I believe led to our expansion of consciousness. At first it was like, let's party, we got acid, we have good homegrown weed and blah, 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 blah. But over time it started to like really shift our perspective. And my crew of friends, we were definitely the hippies in the school. But we kept doing it, and we had access also to psilocybin mushrooms that were growing in the fields of my friend's house next door. We were wild. They were for sure. When we had our all-weekend parties, it's the South in the United States. There was too much liquor. There was always a fight, etc., etc. But there was also somehow that we were like, hey, this is also beyond just like, let's get together and get drunk and screw kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find that really interesting because I've done LSD and done all the drugs and all of that.
I read your book.
Yes, thank
Yes.
you, yeah. But I don't think I mentioned the LSD in the book, but, you know, there was lots of that going on, but there was no sense where I come from of that sense of like, okay, wow, maybe we can expand with this. Maybe there's something else.
Yeah.
So what I'm kind of hearing, and was it all of your friends or just was that your perspective?
There was a select crew of about like 6 to 8 of us that were like, wow, there is really giving us a new perspective on how to see the world.
Right.
And how to see reality. And you know, many of us are still, I don't think the other guys have gone as deeply into it as I have, because after I moved away from North Carolina, I went to the University of Denver, studied hotel and restaurant management. I have a business degree in hotel management. And then eventually I ended up in San Francisco, California, where I was working for the Hyatt Hotel Corporation. But the whole time there was like something wanting to be free from the confines of the material world.
Was you aware of this and was you kind of paying any attention to it, or because I'm interested.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's ticking away there from the very beginning.
Yeah, I would say I wasn't so aware of it until like life in San Francisco, and I started doing transformational workshops and recreational substances started to move into more ceremonial therapeutic things like this. Like, I have to say I'm 52 now, that when I look at kids, if you're only listening, I'm putting my quote marks up, you know, kids like in their 20s and early 30s that I meet today, they seem way more turned on than I was, like flipped onto the path of consciousness. Mine, like I said, was, I like to call things recreamonial, part recreation, part ceremonial.
Yeah,
this way.
Yeah, so by the time you kind of grew into this identity, it sounds like, it pretty much sounds like, you grasped at something because you sense that was the way forward for you in life. And
absolutely, yeah. So an interesting piece of this is when I moved to California, I had the job at the Hyatt Hotel Corporation, and my parents were very proud of me. I had this prestigious job as a food service manager, and 3 years into the job, I realized this is going to lead to early death. I'm out of here. And so I called my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm sorry, but I'm going to quit this job. I spent 4 years in university. This was my path. And my mother said on the phone, she said, are you happy? I said, I'm not happy with the job. She said, then let it go. And this was like, wow, revolutionary that they would support me in like, okay, I have built this foundation, but I need to have happiness in what I do.
yeah, for sure.
And so a couple months later, I found a really great job in software technology, building SQL databases. This was like, I would say, the second .com wave in late 90s in San Francisco. Really cool, high-paying job, great travel benefits, et cetera, et cetera. A couple years into it, I started going to Burning Man, which we'll kind of get back to that in a second as well. I got burnt out on it, sitting doing tech support and building SQL databases and blah, blah, blah. So I called my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm not happy anymore. They said, well, then, do you know what you're going to do? I said, I have no idea. I said, if you're not happy, cut the losses now. And so I hung up the phone. I resigned from that job, and I took my first yoga teacher training in September of the year 2000. And since then, I've been really happy with my work and with my life and with my path. You know, it's not always rainbows and unicorns, but I believe that I also have an entrepreneurial spirit from both sides of my family lineage that have brought me into this.
Yeah, I think definitely you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, and I think that comes out, you know, what I've seen of you in holding space and just connecting with people knowing how to make things happen, you know. And I'm talking about energetically now around a big group of people, maybe 150 people, you know, just knowing that, you know, getting people to move and that's you know, I mean, it is space holding, but there's something very, very kind of intuitive about that as well. And I think entrepreneurial people are very intuitive. And
I've never seen that kind of correlation between an entrepreneurial mindset and the ability to hold space, but it absolutely works. It's not. I would like my events also to earn me money because it's my job, but at the same time, it requires that sensitivity of like, okay, what's going on in the space here?
Yeah, and I think entrepreneurs are people who develop something and you know, and they create something, and obviously they get something out of it, but it's also of service to others as well. And that's kind of, that incorporates it all. But I think it's just just really valuable to note that, because most people, when you talk about entrepreneurs, they think business, and
right.
And I've been an entrepreneur, and I am an entrepreneur, and was from a very, very early age, you know, selling shoes down at Brick Lane and stuff like that. And but I think, you know, there's a wider expanse that I think people like you and people like me now can kind of bring to the table with people's ideas and expansion. You was talking about expanding people's ideas and people's consciousness, and you know, I think it's there's so many different ways to do it, and they're not all traditional. And I just love the support that you had from your family of just saying, look, if that's not working, cut your losses, move on.
Yeah, you know, when our kids went away to university, our son Sam started in architecture, and 2 years into it, it was like a wet blanket on his passion for life. And we said, okay, cut it. And he looked at us with these eyes like he couldn't believe it, because if he had gone to his friends' houses who come from more traditional backgrounds, well, I was an architect, or this is it, you've started this, you have to finish it, kind of thing, like, ooh, this kind of oppression. But what were you talking about with this entrepreneurial piece? It triggered a memory of me. My website is findbalance.net, and I bought the domain in 2001 when I first, and my idea was, because I was coming out of the world of hospitality and hotel restaurant management, and I was becoming a yoga teacher. So clearly find balance in the yoga world has to do with these physical, mental, spiritual aspects. But I was also still doing food service consulting at the time. I was helping restaurants with their balance sheets and inventory management. And so I was really in this, like, 1 foot in the spiritual world, 1 foot in the hospitality world. And this was my vision. And over time, I still have the domain, and it's still me very much. But now is more balancing, I would say, the material, physical world with my understanding that we are expansive light beings having a human experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think, and that's just really valuable as well, because a lot of people, I'm got some ideas to do some courses to, you know, help people, just find a deeper experience of themselves. But you know, it's difficult, isn't it, to move from one thing to another. So there's a real transition, and I think especially in the world where you're offering these different sort of services of healing and energy and self-discovery and all of that. And you know, some versions you see are very corporate and they're very, you know, they work really well. But I think for most people, kind of starting out from a groundwork position, really starting out, you know, just trying to build something, it's quite often 1 foot in that something different and 1 foot in what you want to do, and then there comes a point, I think, where you have to let go of the day job, so to speak, and move into, you know, what's calling you. But
yeah, I mean, my mother used to say, there's nothing new under the sun. It's the same work, whether it's in a corporate environment, getting the team to work together, everyone understanding their role and their function in order to maximize profit in the business context, or in a training or a retreat when everyone comes with their own stories and their own baggage and their own relationship to spirit, how to let each one of them feel it themselves, be connected to the community, clearly with an intention of the expansion of consciousness rather than the expansion of financial wealth.
Yeah.
But it's like just contextual, but it's the same work.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's so interesting, but consciousness I'm just thinking like for the normal person who's just out there going about their daily life, I believe we've all got this within us, but I mean, how do you really, can you teach it to people? How can you introduce consciousness to people? And
I think, very challenging question and opportunity, but it's a golden opportunity because it's supporting people to see something that's always there. Whether it's known or not, consciousness always is existing. One of the ways that I like to do it in terms of like, if I were to say from an intellectual analytical approach, picture the present moment as a bubble.
yeah,
And a clear bubble that's expanding. And this bubble is expanding in all directions. And the lining of this bubble is the present moment. And everything on the inside of the bubble is the past. Right. And as the bubble is expanding, so is the past, or everything that has happened in our understanding of time. And on the outside of the bubble, expanding in all directions, is the infinite universe of possibilities. Anything and everything could happen. Because of probabilities, we know that most likely the sun is going to rise up in the east and set in the west, and through history we have all of these things. But it could be that the aliens show themselves tomorrow. The infinite world of possibilities is on the outside of the bubble. So when a human is able to bring the mind physically and also in terms of thought processes to rest on that bubble, on the expansion of time, this is one way to be aware of consciousness. Everything else in the past or the infinite possibilities of the future. I also see consciousness as beyond the comprehension of our human understanding, which takes both courage and some analytical thought to think, wow, there is an entire universe beyond my comprehension, always happening, always present, but somehow I'm both a part of it and I have access to sense it and feel it. And to give people this moment of, wow, like it oftentimes just happens in a split second. And to me, I think that this is teaching consciousness, because it's like I could describe to you the taste of chocolate. Well, it has qualities of earthiness and it's sweet to the taste, blah, 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 blah. We could use words forever, but until you like put it in your mouth and you taste it, you never really have it. So teaching consciousness requires the ability to bring a direct experience to it. Otherwise, it's purely analytical, which to me is only a small fraction of consciousness.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that explanation. And you touched on a key word of needing courage. And my kind of reflection on that is that most of us want security. Most of us want, to know what's going to happen and to know that if we get up and go to work, we're going to get a paycheck at the end of it or whatever, we're going to fall in love, we're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. Most people want a story and they want to kind of, live out that story in a way and not necessarily tied to it, but just generally that gives them a sense of security. And most people, especially when you said that, like the aliens might land tomorrow, most people they don't even want to think about that kind of stuff because that's horrifying. Everything can change. Like a bit like the pandemic, everything changed instantly.
Totally.
People couldn't go to work in different countries. People couldn't go out of their house. Everything changed, and that's terrifying for people. I think it's terrifying. So how do we introduce to people? People are just going about their daily lives. That actually is a much deeper experience that you can tap into straight away, but it requires being courageous. It requires probably looking at some stuff of how you function and your processes in life. And I certainly think for my own awareness, I've had to, change some of that stuff on the surface and then to be able to expand a bit, to be able to kind of see outside that bubble that you spoke about. And so, it's a big challenge.
I mean, to get to the good stuff, it has to start on the surface.
Yeah.
And you ask the question, how can we teach that, or how is this possible? I would say, in my experience, it works, let's say, fairly effectively in the beginning to teach and give the low-hanging fruit. Get access to the low-hanging fruit. Go to an ecstatic dance where somebody likes the music, or have some connection to nature. I would say to first bring an experience of palpability of love. A feeling of love that's warm, that feels connected in the heart, that has humans relating to each other, to nature. This is pretty accessible to most people of any mindset, of any education. There can be that experience. And then say, okay, this is one slice of the entire pie, because many spiritual seekers get attached to pleasure. That, okay, I want the bliss. Yeah. But can I say shit on your podcast? Digging in the shit. Digging in the shit and stirring up the traumas of generations, stirring up the traumas of our own life. Like I said, I read your book, and you went through some serious shit, man. Like, wow. And to see how you are today is a beautiful testament to what is possible when you have been able to look at and address the things that you did and that happened to you and say, wow, these are learning points for me to grow from. Yeah. This is as valuable as the work of the bliss of an ecstatic dance and having a deep meditation. And it doesn't take as much courage to go find something that feels good. It takes a lot of courage to go to a therapist, or to go to a men's circle, or to do a weekend workshop aimed at addressing your shadows. That takes more courage.
It does, yeah, and that's really valuable. That how you framed that, and that was my first sense of like there was something outside or something bigger than me. It was just noticing stuff that had been there, my whole life, that I just was kind of just wasn't part of what I saw, but it was there. So it was kind of like, just connecting with that and just feeling that connection of like nature, of the stars, and just thinking, wow, that's amazing.
I'm going to make a loop back when I said before about I started going to Burning Man in 1995.
Yes.
And this was, I was in my mid-20s and in a very developmental stage for me. And there I definitely met a lot of mystical people. And I had been going also to a couple of rainbow gatherings. So I've been around the field of people really outside the scope of typical modern normal life. And through Burning Man, back when in the late 90s and early 2000s, I went for 10 years in a row. There I for sure felt like it was a laboratory of experimenting with consciousness. Through electronic music, there was a lot of drugs, but there was sex parties, etc., etc. But everything had a bit of an undercurrent of like, hey, this is not just hedonism. This is like shifting the paradigm of reality to what it could be. Because there were also workshops of people dealing with traumas. There was a lot of tears. There was a lot of confrontation, and community had to come together to solve problems, like in the Native American traditions and the tribal councils and things like this that we have moved away from.
And I sense that you take all of that experience with you, and especially, you spoke about rites of passage when you was at your bar mitzvah was a rite of passage, and kind of, looping back round into the men's work. I know a lot of men, because I'm in a men's circle, and I'm definitely wanting to come and pay a visit to yours when the opportunity arises.
Great.
But there's a lot of kind of people looking to function in this modern world, to find masculinity, to find just a sense of who they are, and look to some of the older ways that we've lost, really. Some of the you spoke about that tribal stuff. I mean, it's not all about that. It's about the connection, and it's about the tools that came from them periods. That where things were passed on, knowledge was passed on, experience was passed on,
right,
and rites of passage was passed on, and I find that there's lots of men now joining men's circles and working in brotherhood and just showing up for each other and allowing ourselves to be who we are, sensitive, allowing the masculine and the feminine, and there's just so much kind of going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that reclaiming of masculinity, which clearly I'm a big supporter and believer of. And there's also a bit of kind of discrediting of the emotional side of that. And there's a point that I oftentimes bring up in terms of the patriarchy has always been like, well, men have done this to women, etc., etc. But it is not the world has not only been of evil men. There have been conscious, awake, kind, powerful men in the world that had to also watch their mothers, daughters, sisters, cousins burned at the stake, that nothing they could do. So the fire and the power of a man not able to fulfill his purpose has also been carrying on with us, possibly at the extent of, men in general having to shut off ourselves to our emotions. Because, imagine that, there we are. There is my beloved mother, sister, etc., etc., and the torture was happening, and all of these things, and we could not do anything about it at the sake of our own lives or the community that we were somehow supporting in the big picture.
Yeah, and I mean, when I say masculinity, I suppose there's my sense of masculinity today is allowing all of that stuff, is allowing the feeling, because my sense of masculinity, excuse me, growing up was like, it was just the cold, hard.
Iron John, did you read the book?
I haven't read that. But
Okay,
it's been mentioned many times, but yeah, just that, a masculine was a male, was a tough guy, was, just very, very focused on a kind of narrow narrative, really. And so for me today, masculinity is allowing feeling, is allowing parts of me that I absolutely denied and now celebrate, and really just beautiful parts of me that I live without, and I chose to live without because no one had ever showed me or nurtured, there was no path of living with that stuff. It was like...
Yeah, we were fed the narrative.
Yeah.
And that narrative was both limited in its scope and not necessarily true.
It was true in the reality that I was in, because I didn't see any. I couldn't see outside that bubble. All I could see was the past, and all I could see was the present of how people was behaving and how I thought I needed to behave and I needed to be to survive. And I became that warrior. I became a warrior that would go to the end and go to the death, and that was kind of, I was okay with that. I'd kind of made peace with that.
Yes.
And then to look back at this and discover, actually, you was just living. You'd created this this persona you'd created, this
Right,
identity. And
right.
listen, we're going to go right back round to when I started asking you about how you created that identity.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'd created that identity for myself and I lived in it and it fitted me. It was a good fit. You know, I kind of done everything I needed to be there. And when I look back now, it was like, wow, I just created that and lived in it, and it could have gone the whole journey like that. But I didn't, because I gradually became conscious through change. And
we did an exercise. I love to make up exercises with the men's circle. And a couple months ago, we did one where there are the 5 common archetypes of men: the king, joker, lover, warrior, magician. Those are the typical ones. But in modern times, I said, let's see if we can be archetype fluid. Yeah. So when we were together with the men of the circle, I said, all right, we're going to spend a little bit of time, and I want each one of us to make up your own fictitious archetype. What would be your archetype based on the way that you see the world, what you do with your job, your family roles, etc., and all of these points. And for me, it was fairly obvious with the way that I am in the world and where I put myself, because I've always identified with the king as the more classical archetype, because I'm a natural born leader. For some strange reason, people listen to me when I speak, etc., etc. Like I have an authority, something like this. And I was kind of backing away and moving around, and I said, and the light bulb flashed over my head. I said, my archetype is the spiritual showman, because I love to be in front of people. I love to perform. I'm a musician. I can do the creative things that happen all around. But at the same time, I want there to be a bit of sacredness in everything that I do. I want there to be a bit of that relationship to the infinite bubble of consciousness and everything that there is. So a spiritual showman was my archetypal identity that I created for myself. So I guess full circle around to the beginning, my identity, there I am. I'm the spiritual showman, David Lee Lurie.
But and of course we do, you know, we put out there what we feel and what we are. And when that's authentic, when that's real, and there's people love the show. People love to be, you know, shown how to do things and
this is why gurus succeed. But I just had an idea while I was thinking about this, because I do want this to be a little bit more than just Stephen and David having a conversation. What would your archetypal type be if you could create the identity and the style of here's an archetype that represents you in all of the things that you do in the world, from physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual ways? Send it in the comments. What is your new age archetype?
Wow. Okay. You just broke the fourth wall there.
Yes. Okay.
Brilliant. But I think it's I think it's an interesting question. I'm going to probably take that to my men's group.
Bravo. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
And actually, we've been.
And you can use my example, because it helps to have an example.
Brilliant. We was just doing a bit of breath work together this morning, and it's just connecting with the men is just really powerful.
Yes.
Obviously, it was online, but we're doing like a 10-day challenge just for accountability to kind of show up and. And just that kind of being accountable as well in your growth and showing up in your life, and you know, in your aspirations is really valuable.
My brain constantly works in song lyrics and aphorisms. This one brought up one of my favorite teachers, Adil Palkivala, said, if you have integrity in life, nothing else matters. If you lack integrity in life, nothing else matters. It's like it really comes down to that. So when there's a sense of accountability, especially in a more masculine brotherhood, let's challenge each other in a positive way. Not that I'm going to be better than you and I'm going to beat you, but okay, can we both reach our own unique goals in this in a way where integrity is present, then it's absolutely win-win everywhere.
And I think, I think that win-win is about, it's obviously there is, we all have a sense of competition, but it's more like, we're holding each other up, and you don't want to see your brother fail. You don't want to see them, not meeting their potential. You don't want to see them, and it's about challenging as well, isn't it? It's about really, really sort of being accountable. And on our men's group, I mean, sometimes, I feel someone will come with something and then I'll not challenge it, but reflect. And sometimes it's a bit like, it feels a bit, this is a bit...
edgy.
This is a bit edgy, yeah.
That's what, one of the standards of our circle is to lean into the edge.
Yeah.
And as you were just saying it last week, we have a man down. Like, one of the brothers in our circle is passing through a really difficult moment, and like, just to see that brought me to an emotional state right now to relive that. So that sense of brotherhood and not wanting to see an intimate brother going down touches something.
And I think this work is really valuable because it expands out to the men's families, their
absolutely,
their work colleagues, the people that they know, their friends. And it's just I think we touched on before about the kind of task of taking consciousness and bringing it to, not bringing it, revealing it to like the masses and kind of the narrative that most of the world's has been conditioned into, of just about looking after me and mine and getting what we need and it's just this men's work, this close circle work, kind of is a really good way to take stock of who we are, but also to start to filter that out, start to put something good out into the world. And the light that you carry is beautiful, and that's really why I wanted to talk to you, because I see that light that you're carrying in what you do.
Thank you.
And it really filters out, and
it's a line that I've been forced to walk for a better part of my life. My parents have always said that I was special, and I heard it long enough that I started to believe them. And through the things that I do, and I think also I carry in my heart that, for better or worse, it has its shadow side. I want to do good in the world, which has a big weight to it. I also feel like I want to do right and put things out in the world and how I see a high set of standards and values, which I think, brings me the lightness that I have. I also have the benefit of being born when I did and where I did, and to the family that I did, that I have never really had major hardships that kind of harden people, that I've been able to expand into this path where I am now through a lot of conscious choices and a lot of hard work. I mean, I busted my ass for 20 years traveling around the world with my guitar and my yoga mat and leading courses and setting things up, and my entrepreneurial mindset at play here. But at the same time, like I for sure feel like the longer I've been on the path, the more I feel able to rest in the fact that, wow, okay, I have access to something, not necessarily that I am something, but I have access to that lightness, and I want to do my part to share it as much as possible.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think you mentioned the shadow, that the light comes, it always comes with a shadow, and I think for me it's been really a recognition of needing to understand that shadow and how it is, and sometimes to stand in it, not to project it out, but just to stand in it and just
so much
recognize.
easier to project it out, Stephen.
It is, yeah. But sometimes, it's like this awareness that expands out also expands in.
Yes.
So I've become very sort of aware of my processes and aware of that shadow self and where it wants to come out. And sometimes I just go and stand in it where it wants to come out and just go, yeah, I'm okay, you know. We don't have to be doing this, or we don't have to be acting out like that.
Yeah.
Taking it in that direction, you know.
The spiritual showman has very thin skin. My shadow side is is any constructive feedback. I've done the wrong thing. I've done this. I didn't do it right. I didn't do it the best. I learned at an early age to gain love, I had to do things to a perfect level. I had to do things the right way, and that's how I got love back. So when constructive feedback comes, that's one of my biggest shadow sides, is I can become really, like, first of all, defensive, second, self-righteous, third, a real prick. So I'm aware of them. I haven't been able to tame them in fully, but I see when they come.
Yeah, and that's really useful, isn't it? Seeing where they're coming. And you've just kind of, as you was talking about that, it just sparked something that happened for me the other day. And I was with my partner here, my girlfriend, and she lives in a different country to me, and we're both this is like a third country that we kind of meet in and connect in. So she's going home Tuesday, which is in a couple of days' time, and she's got a lot of her own friends and stuff here, and basically I was really feeling like there was a conflict of like where she was spending her time, and also when I was out sort of hiking with my friend on Sunday, I was in conflict about, you know, should I be with her, or should she come with us? And so there's all this conflict going on, and I was aware of the conflicts and just thinking, what is this conflict, you know? And yesterday we planned to go out and do something together, and she said the night before, she said, do you mind if we change that tomorrow, because I want to go and sort this stuff out, that, you know, she's got some stuff here that she needs to put in storage, and I was like, you know, I really felt it, and I was thinking, my shadow started coming in, and I was thinking, well, why don't you cancel some of your other appointments? But I didn't sort of speak to it. I was just aware of it, and I woke up in the morning, in like 3:33 a.m. in the morning, and I could feel my whole heart space just closing down towards her, and I could feel this like armor just coming on, and it was like. And I was thinking, wow, this is like, I can really feel this stuff. And then I realised that I'd been triggered, and it went back to, I actually wrote about it in that book, but it went back to a relationship I had when I was 17, when I was kind of going out with my friends, and the girl I was with was kind of started going out in a different place, and eventually met someone else and left me, you know, and I had the stuff that I felt but I didn't feel, so I pushed it all down. Yeah. And this was a wound that had kind of come out through my whole life, certainly in romantic relationships, but also just in friendships. Yeah. And it was like 3:33 in the morning. I just thought, wow, that's what it is. Yeah. And the next day I was able to sort of discuss it with her and said, you know, this was the process that was going on.
This is what got touched in me.
And my heart just opened up again. So it was just beautiful. Such a powerful moment. Yeah. And then as I've looked back in all of my, I see this everywhere. You know, this conflict and what happens in this conflict. I suppose at the root of it was, you know, I didn't want to be abandoned, because it went back to kind of abandonment at a much younger age as well. That's where it started, you know. So just this internal process.
Yeah,
I'm
thanks for sharing that.
61 years old now. Yeah, this is going back to 17 years old, and still had an influence. And I've done a lot of work, but I never made that connection.
The roots run deep of those things.
Yeah, of what that conflict was, and. So I shared it, and I just don't know. Well, I've shared it now. So anyway,
I'll kind of reroute us back to that. Like, this is also part of the expansion of consciousness, because that was lying as a dormant seed inside of your being, and just like a seed in the ground, it takes the right temperature, the amount of water, whatever impulse happens for it to break through and become a sprout. Like, the conditions were right for that seed to sprout. Yeah. And the unconscious approach would have been like, well, damn it, I'm angry now. It's her fault. She should have done this, blah, 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 and project it outwards. But the conscious approach is to say, wow, what is my part in this story? And it sounds like you've done a wonderful experience with that.
Yeah, it's just
not pleasant.
It was beautiful, really, to realise it, because it just changed. My energy changed straight away, but I could feel that, and I'd had it in the previous relationships and never spoke to it, never addressed it, and the difference in this one is that there's that level of emotional connection and awareness on both sides, and I was able to not only say that but actually recognise it, and it feels like that conflict, it may come up again at different times, but I'll know what it is. And see, I was dealing with it on one level of like, the Mr. Nice Guy level of like looking at my part, why am I being nice? And I could kind of make these choices on this level of like, okay, this doesn't really work for me, so I should say no, or this works for me. But when it's something much deeper, feeding that, and you can't see it, it's really interesting. I think I've just thrown a bomb right in the middle there, and we've gone in a completely different direction. But
well, we didn't know which direction we were going, so that's perfect.
Exactly, but yeah, just I think, and as you say, consciousness is about. Yeah, it's about knowing what's going on for ourselves, because without knowing, then I'm in that conflict, and not really knowing where it's coming from or why it's there. And and that's a dark place to be, really.
Yes.
So I brought some light to that one.
Beautiful,
and,
well done.
And hopefully, maybe someone will identify with that on some level. I don't know, but it's. It's the work of just being authentic, I think, and coming into just being authentic in how I show up for myself and how I show up in relationships and how I show up for other people.
Very important. But this,
I'm feeling a bit
authentic.
embarrassed. Maybe my shadow's coming up a bit.
Yeah,
but it's all good. It's all good.
The more that I feel that I can bring my shadow out into the public and kind of have it by my side and be like, this is also part of me. He let's say, lessens the power that it has over me, and also supports the wholeness of who I am. It's not like I'm denying it and cutting it off like, the stepbrother that doesn't exist. No, it's very much part of me, and I'm part of this human experience in a temporary temple of my body with all of my changing thoughts, and this is part of my experience.
The human experience, it's a beautiful and difficult and
it's a lovely mystery,
a wonderful mystery. But it's great that there's people like you around who are just out there sharing stuff and introducing people to different levels of access to their own stuff, like we spoke about earlier, with the ecstatic dance, and just bringing people into actually experiencing that, and just that kind of level of consciousness. And I took a friend to the ecstatic dance actually once, and I probably shared it on another podcast with someone, but it was just such a beautiful thing to see. You was there actually.
Okay.
You was at the dance, and he was just like in a cement suit, and I started my process, my dance, and I was like, I forgot about him, and then I kind of opened my eyes, and he was like just like that, looking around at everyone, thinking, what the effing hell's going on here? And I forgot about him, and then about half hour later, I kind of like came across him, and he was just like fluid
in the flow.
So he'd obviously accessed stuff that that he was just carrying that outer stuff, and he'd got through it somehow. And
I think ecstatic dance in particular, because the way that I like to hold the space is a free space. Nobody's guiding anything. You don't have to dance a certain way. You don't do anything. No talking. There's an important piece of it. But like when the music speaks to the person, it's almost impossible not to move in some way. And when there are others that have taken that freedom and amplified it into their own expression, then that becomes contagious. Yeah. Which also happens with singing, in the singing circles that I do.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that this consciousness that you bring and I bring and we collectively bring together keeps expanding. I'm sure it will. I'm sure
this is going to be a new song title for me, Contagious Consciousness.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yes.
Look forward to that one.
All right.
David, we're kind of running out of time, so
Fantastic.
just to recap on where people can contact you. Are you on Instagram or?
I am on Instagram with my name, David Lee Lurie, or maybe just David Lurie, I think, on Instagram. And I also manage the Ecstatic Dance Mallorca page. My music is on Spotify and any and all streaming channels. And now that I'm mostly retired from teaching yoga, streaming music helps me live the life in which I'm accustomed. So please put the songs on repeat and in your playlists. And, expansion of music is also part of the expansion of consciousness. So streaming through music. Miriam and I lead 1 to 2 yoga retreats a year, and most of my time is spent here on this precious island of Mallorca.
Brilliant. Yeah. David, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks very much. Lots of love.
With pleasure.
Take care.